Namaste, my friends. Today I'm going to talk about, I guess, what you could call an advanced topic, but don't let the word advanced scare you, even if you're new to astrology. This really isn't all that difficult. I'm going to be talking about relocational astrology, specifically AstroCartography, which is a way of mapping, creating maps to see areas that are important for a person. And specifically why in astrocartography the in-mundo positions of the planets are used. These in-mundo positions are not the usual positions that we use in astrology. They're different, and I want to talk about what they are and why they are used. Okay, so if you haven't seen the video where I introduce relocational astrology and astrocartography, and this is all Greek to you, you could watch that first if you want to, but it's not required as long as you can follow me here. Okay, so in that previous video I was looking at Robert Redford's chart, and I had relocated his chart to a few places. So here's Robert Redford's natal chart. I'm going to click on the astromap, and there's an astromap for Robert Redford. And what we see, as we saw in the previous video, is that Mercury and Neptune are coming in here just west of Eureka. This is Mercury and Neptune, both opposition the ascendant. Mercury opposition the ascendant, coming here. Neptune opposition the ascendant, both coming just west. Here's Eureka, California, and going up here. And here's the moon opposite the ascendant, going almost vertically straight up out in the ocean and coming up, and it looks like it goes almost directly through Prince Rupert, Canada. Okay, and this is an astrocartography map. Astrocartography is a term created by astrologer Jim Lewis back several decades ago, and this is the astrocartography map, and it's an in-mundo map. Now, if I right-click on this and I go, that went off the screen here because I'm capturing the left corner of my screen, my monitor screen. I'll show you why later. Anyway, I right-click and I get my settings. I go to Customize, Features of all maps, and I change this back to longitude. I say back because when Sirius and Kepler, oops, let me drag this over. It keeps going outside my captured window area. Kepler and Sirius are both shipped with the longitude setting, and you can change it to in Mundo, which makes it a standard astrocartography. Now, if I do it in longitude, click OK, click OK. Now it's very different. Remember, the moon opposition was way out here in the ocean, going up through Prince Rupert, Canada. Now the moon opposition is this yellow line, going right up, almost right through Eureka. We magnified that in the previous video on relocation and astrocartography. It's actually slightly east of Eureka. So it moves. Now, so is moon opposite the ascendant going through Eureka? Or is it out here in the ocean going up through Prince Rupert, Canada? Which one is correct? And furthermore, now the Mercury and Neptune opposition, well, the Mercury opposition the ascendant still on the west side of Eureka, but now Neptune, as compared to the in-mundo, I think it's moved a little further west out into the ocean. But let's focus on the moon, because it has a dramatic difference. Is the moon really here in Eureka, opposite the ascendant? Or, according to the astrocartography in-mundo approach, it's way out here? Which one is correct? Well, what I'll suggest to you is this one is correct. The one done in longitude rather than the in mundo, which is the traditional way astrocartography was done. This one is definitely correct. And the one done in mundo may also be correct. Maybe it tells us something different. But the reason I say that this one is correct is because this matches the relocated chart. And we looked at that in the previous video, that moon opposite the ascendant going through Eureka. And if we go and we look at Robert Redford's chart, which is over here, relocated to Eureka. The moon is right on the 7th house cusp, and I showed in the previous video that that line, I'm going to go back to his natal chart and the astromap, that this line for moon opposite the ascendant, I clicked on it in two different places, one down here and one way up here, and showed that this is where the moon is exactly opposite the ascendant. So using the longitude method, the zodiac longitude method, the astromap is another picture of the same information you get in a relocated chart. This relocated chart and this astromap telling you the same exact thing. The advantage to the relocated chart is you see the details for one location. The advantage of the astromap is you can see where a planet is on a house cusp, an angular house cusp. You could also add aspects, as we did in the previous video. So there's the moon on that 7th house cusp, and it was opposition to the ascendant. So that clearly works, and this is a valuable map. Now, why do we want an in Mundo positions in our astromap, which is what Jim Lewis originally did, and the term astrocartography, originally coined by Jim Lewis, meant that the map was done in Mundo. Why would we want to do that? Well, I want to show you why. Even though it doesn't match your astrology chart, there's a logic to it, and the logic is, is pretty convincing to some people. So if I right-click, go back to, let me drag this over here so you can see this. Go to Customize, Features of All Maps, OK. Go back to the In Mundo. There's several settings here, but this is the typical In Mundo. And I select that, and drag this over here so you can see what I'm doing. Click OK and click OK. Now I'm back to that In Mundo version where the moon opposite the ascendant, or in other words, well, it's actually not on the 7th house cusp. I'll explain that. But it's moon opposite the eastern horizon. Well, I'll explain in a minute. It's similar to moon opposite the ascendant, going through Prince Rupert. Now, to understand this, I'm going to show it to you three ways. What in Mundo really means, okay? So we'll look at this three different ways, and hopefully this will make sense to you. The first thing I'm going to do is I've relocated Robert Redford's chart to Prince Rupert, Canada. So let's look at it. I've already done it. It's right here. Okay, so there's his chart, Robert Redford's chart, relocated to Prince Rupert. Here's the moon at 19 degrees 14 minutes Virgo, nowhere near the relocated 7th house cusp. It's just not near it. So why, using the In Mundo, are we saying the moon is opposite the ascendant? It appears to make no sense. Well, let me show you three ways of looking at it. One is, what order should I do this in? Let me show you where the planets are in the actual sky. Let's do that first. We'll go to Maps and Sky Map. Sky Map means a map of the sky, right? Okay. Well, here's a sky map right up here. It's opened up the Kepler Workshop window. By the way, what I've done here is I've captured my taskbar, as it's called. You know, that little bar across the bottom of your screen in Windows. And I happen to have my email program up. Just to give you a realistic situation, you might have different programs open. And when we ran this feature of Kepler Workshop, it opened up. I can click over here, go back to Sirius, click over here, go back to Kepler Workshop. It's a very nice arrangement because you have that many more things that you can call up very quickly on your screen. So some of the features in Sirius are actually in a separate module called Kepler Workshop. And the same is true with Kepler, the separate module Kepler Workshop, allowing you to quickly have these things available. Here I'm back to the wheel, here I'm back to the sky map. Now, this sky map shows where the planets and some stars are, also the constellations that connect some of the stars, where they actually are if we were outside at the time Robert Redford was born in Prince Rupert, Canada. This is, the left side is the northern hemisphere, means over our heads. We're looking at a circular map, and we're doing horizon map, a circular. The red, this tells you red is the horizon, green is the ecliptic, and yellow is the equator. The horizon, because we're using the horizon selection, which we've selected here, is around the outer edge. If I select ecliptic, now the green ecliptic is on the outer edge. But I want the horizon, so I'll go back to that. And this means this is the horizon, this is the point directly over your head. So if you're standing up, you would see the constellation Draco over your head. And here's the moon, this white dot, it says moon, may be difficult for you to read, right under it's Mercury and Neptune and Venus. But see, the moon is right on the horizon. So this is the idea of in Mundo. It tells you when the planet is on the horizon. It's setting, because here it's rising, coming up, and the moon is setting. In fact, if I, and here's the sun, by the way, also on the horizon, and this is below us, so it had just set. So at 4:02 Universal Time, which is the time that Robert Redford was born, the sun had just set. If I go 1 minute earlier, here's arrows, I can move a minute earlier. Let's see, if I keep going a minute earlier, well, several minutes earlier, to 3:59. I moved 3 minutes earlier, the sun jumped over here. Means the sun is setting. This is west, it's setting a little to the north, because it doesn't set directly west on most days, setting a little bit in this direction, and that's exactly where it was setting. And if I go a minute later, see it says 3:59, I click here, now it says at exactly 4 hours, the sun has set, and it's down here. And if I keep going, and I click, 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 I'll just click very fast, or I can jump by a larger amount. Let me jump by 10 minutes. And I click, and the sun is now moving away from the horizon underneath us. Eventually it'll come down here close to being underneath us, and it'll rise later. So you can actually watch, as I click 10 minutes at a time now, we're watching the planets move in the actual sky. And now, and it's telling me I'm up to 5:26. Then I'll go back, and keep going back till I get back to that 4:02. Change this to 1 minute. And keep going back, 4:05, 4:04, 4:03. It tells me I'm back to his time of 4:02. And this is where the planets were when Robert Redford was born, but in Prince Rupert, Canada. So, again, this is a map of the sky. The bottom line is this. Very simple. If you didn't follow all that, no worries. The moon is on the horizon. The sun is on the horizon. So, that's what in Mundo tells us. It tells us if the planet is on the horizon, or if it crosses what we call the meridian plane. And if I go back to the chart wheel, click over here, even though the moon is way up here, far, reasonably far from the 7th house cusp, you may think as an astrologer that means the moon has not set yet. But you know what? The moon has set. The moon is setting at this exact moment in this location of Prince Rupert. So the houses are not actually what astrologers sometimes think they are. That's the bottom line. We tend to think that this 7th house is just above the horizon. Well, it tends to be just above the horizon, but it isn't always just above the horizon. And what the in Mundo does, you might say it corrects the houses so that the seventh cusp is the horizon. I mean, that's not really exactly right, but it's changing it so that, let me say technically correctly, that the in Mundo makes it so that when a planet is setting, then that's considered to be the important point. So our houses are not really what we say they are exactly. This area here is not exactly above the seventh house necessarily. So actually the moon is just setting right here, even though we say it's here. So the problem is our houses are not exactly what we might want them to be. So the in Mundo makes the houses what they should be if you want the seventh cusp to be the setting point. And the reason our houses are not exactly what we may think, the seventh house is not necessarily just above the horizon, I'll go back to the sky, is because this green line is the ecliptic plane, and the setting point is right here, where Regulus is. Regulus is setting right where the seventh house cusp is. So where the ecliptic plane crosses the horizon is the seventh house cusp. So Regulus in this chart happens to be almost exactly on the seventh house cusp. Excuse me. So in other words, this is the seventh house cusp, right where Regulus is, right there. Green line, that's the seventh cusp. The moon is way over here, and the moon is setting, but very far away from the ecliptic plane. And we use the ecliptic plane as our reference. We actually don't use the moon's actual position in astrology. We project it on the ecliptic plane. You might say we make believe it's over here. We project it or make believe it's on the ecliptic plane. We don't actually use the actual moon position in astrology. So in astrology, we do some kind of odd things. Maybe they're not that odd. And the in Mundo, you might say, in a sense, corrects for that by by detecting when a planet actually sets, rather than conjunct the cusp. Whew, did you follow that? It's maybe a little bit confusing because there's some surprises if you're not familiar with this information. And the surprises are that the way we do things in astrology may not be exactly the way it was explained to you or you had thought of it in the past. So in Mundo will tell us when the planet is actually on the horizon as opposed to on the cusp. Now, so that's why in Mundo is used, and why in Mundo does not match your astrology chart. Okay, now let me go back to the wheel. Here's the problem that I have with using in Mundo positions in astrocartography. The problem that I have is that it's inconsistent with everything else we do in astrology. If we should use in Mundo positions, then let's use in Mundo positions for houses. And we should then consider the moon here to be conjunct the seventh house cusp. You follow me? According to in Mundo positions, the moon is setting, and that would be a seventh house effect. In the astrology we normally do, the moon is not on the seventh cusp. It's, it's what, 22, 23 degrees away from it. It's way up here. So if we believe in Mundo, it makes no sense to me that we use it only for astrocartography, for our astromaps, but we never use it any other time. It just doesn't compute for me, so to speak. It's just not consistent. So and I say for me because just to personalize it and help you try to make sense of it, you may make different sense of it than I do, but it gives you a sense of how we deal with these things or how we wrestle with them. So for me, I have that problem that if I believe in Mundo, why don't I use it in the astrology chart? And and other things, prediction, etc., rather than only relocation. It just doesn't make sense. If I want to use in Mundo, in the astrology chart, there's a way to do that, and that's the second way I'm going to show you in Mundo. One way you can do it, and it's not necessarily the right way to do it. It's one way. It gets complicated. I'm not going to get into all the details of the astronomy. But one way to do it is to go to Settings, Coordinate System, and select the Mundoscope, which is a word astrologers made for a chart along the prime vertical. Don't let the word scare you. Don't worry about it. Let me just show you something. It asks me some questions. I'm just going to say okay. And the Mundoscope is one way to have in Mundo houses, so that anything in Libra in the Mundoscope is 7th house. Scorpio would be 8th house. Sagittarius, so Jupiter's in the 9th house. North Node's in the 11th house. Aquarius is the 11th sign. Saturn and Uranus would be 1st house. So Aries in a Mundoscope means 1st house. I've got Chiron in this wheel. It happens to be in the 4th house, Cancer, and so on. So we've got Pluto and Mars, and the Sun at the very end of Virgo, about 29.5 degrees of Virgo, right on that cusp. So the Sun and Moon are on the cusp, which is exactly what we see. This is exactly what we see in the astromap. This is Robert Redford relocated to Prince Rupert. Remember when we looked at, I'll click over here on the Kepler workshop, there's that moon on the horizon. This is the horizon, this outer edge. Here's the sun also on the horizon. Sun has just set. Moon is about to set. 1 minute later or 2 minutes later, the moon is going to set. We found out that 3 minutes earlier, the sun was above the horizon. I'll do that again. This is, again, Robert Redford relocated to Prince Rupert. I'm going to go back 1 minute, 2 minutes. See, the sun is still here. I'm going to click one more time, and it's going to jump from here to over here. Because this is above the horizon, this is below the horizon. Watch. I'm going to click. Boink. The sun jumped from here to here. It's above the horizon. 1 minute later, I'll go forward, time forward, and I've got 1 minute increment. The sun has set. It went down, and if I keep going for the next 12 hours or so, the sun will go along here and then back up and rise again. Probably will rise over here. But anyway, it just set at 4 o'clock, 2 minutes before. If I go forward, 4:02, this is the time Robert Redford was born. Sun just set a few minutes earlier, about 2 to 3 minutes earlier, and moon is almost ready to set. And that is shown, this is an actual picture of the sky. This is the actual real sky, where the planets really were when he was born. I go back to Sirius, and the Mundoscope shows the moon just above the horizon, just about to set because it's just above 0 Libra, and the sun is half a degree, about 2 to 3 minutes earlier. It was up here. And I can show you that here too. I can use our time adjust, interactive time adjust. Let's do the same thing, same exact thing we just did in the when we were looking at this at the sky map. I'm going to go forward. I'm going to go backwards, earlier in time. 1 minute, 2 minutes. See where the sun is? 29 Virgo 52. I'm going to go 3 minutes earlier, and now it's exactly on the 7th cusp. This is precisely what we saw. The same exact information we saw in the sky map. That 3 minutes earlier, the sun is, well, that's actually, we said above the horizon. It's actually right on the horizon, just about to set. If I go a minute earlier, now it's 0 Libra 09. Another minute earlier, 0 Libra 18. It's above, and as I go forward, and now we're back to that 0 Libra, the sun is exactly setting, and go forward till we get to 8:02 p.m., which is, it was 4:02 universal time, also known as Greenwich Mean Time, the next day, because he's born on the west coast of USA. But anyway, the point being, at the time he was born, 8:02 p.m., the sun had just set. So you can use the mundoscope as a way to see houses in the natal chart. There are other ways of doing it, and that gets a little bit technical, but it's one way to at least have houses based on the horizon plane, and this is what we call the meridian plane. I don't want to get too far afield in all the astronomy. I want you to just get the basic idea that this would be a house. You could use the mundoscope as a house system to be consistent with with your astrocartography maps. In other words, if you believe in Mundo positions are important, then maybe you should also look at this for the natal chart. I'm going to hit cancel, and then I'm back to looking at his mundoscope for his birth time, which was 8:02 p.m. Did you follow that? Let me summarize. I know it can be overwhelming. It's really not that bad. What I'm saying is that astrocartography, as developed by Jim Lewis, uses in-Mundo positions. In-Mundo positions are based really on the horizon and the meridian plane. The houses we use are kind of based on the horizon and meridian plane, but in a less obvious or straightforward way. So, because nearly all astrologers use longitude, and they find that it works, and they find that the houses are correct, if I go back to settings, coordinate system, and set it back to normal. Now I'm back to my good old chart wheel that we know and love. Happens to be relocated to Prince Rupert, Canada. But now I've got the moon way up here in the 7th house, which is the way we normally think of it. So, and even though the moon is way up there, it's actually on the horizon and just about ready to set. It's perfectly on the horizon. So, if you want your astromaps to fit your chart wheels as we normally do them, you should use the longitude astromap. If you want to use in-Mundo, you can use in-Mundo, which is the original astrocartography, but it is inconsistent with the way we normally do astrology, and that would encourage me, at least, if I wanted to go that route, to look more at in-Mundo positions in general, not just for relocation, but in birth charts. Maybe the moon really isn't up here. Maybe it's on the 7th cusp. So one of the problems we have in astrology is we don't learn a lot of astronomy. We use rules. We trust the astrologers to have figured this out and to do it for us. And there's kind of a mess there in terms of different astronomical facts underlying what we do. The most important thing, I think, is to use consistent rules. So if you want to use longitude, then just use longitude, and I recommend that for your astromaps. If you want to use in-Mundo, then it makes sense to be using in-Mundo in different situations, and you can play with the mundoscope. Now, another way for you to see that the moon is actually on the horizon, what I'm telling you is that the moon in this relocated chart is actually on the horizon, which we think of as being down here. It's about to set, is if you go to listings and you go to fixed star listings, there's a selection here. I've already checked it, actually. 340 stars on the horizon, zenith or nadir, and conjunct and latitude. It does several things for you, but I'm going to click OK. And one thing it does is at the top of this listing, I'll scroll this up a little bit. I'll bring it right up near the top. It tells you the 10 planets, Sun, Moon, and the planets through Pluto, if they happen to be on the horizon. And there it is. Moon is on the horizon, and it's 0 degrees 8 minutes. Altitude means it's 8 minutes, just barely above the horizon. And the sun is 24 minutes, less than half a degree, below the horizon, which again is exactly what we saw. The the sun had just set, and I can do my time adjust here. I'll do interactive time adjust. And if I go 3 minutes earlier, notice the sun is 0 south 24. 1 minute earlier, 0 south 16. See that right there? Another minute earlier, 0 south 8. Another minute earlier, 3, which is a total of 3 minutes earlier, it's exactly on the horizon, confirming exactly what we saw before. Whether we look at it on the sky map, whether we look at it in the Mundoscope, or whether we look at it in a listing, we're getting the same exact information. That at 7:59, it even tells us right here, at 7:59 p.m., the sun is exactly on the horizon, and Robert Redford was born at 8:02, 3 minutes later, and at 8:02 in Prince Rupert, not the place where he was born, which is Santa Monica, California, but in Prince Rupert, at 8:02, let me go back. 1, 2, I can just change it to 3 minutes, but whatever, I'll just click away here 3 times. At 8:02, the sun is 24 minutes below the horizon in Prince Rupert at the time he was born. In other words, for his relocated chart in Prince Rupert. Anyway, I'll just hit cancel in case I changed something and didn't realize I did, so that I don't actually change his time or something. So there we go. This gets a little bit technical, but let me summarize. In astrocartography, as it was originally developed by Jim Lewis, he used in-mundo positions. What is an in-mundo position? An in-mundo position means he wanted to see where the planets would be on the horizon or on what we call the meridian plane, which is roughly the 10th and 4th house cusp, but precisely on the meridian plane, which is different from the way we normally do it, or if the planet is on the horizon, which is not exactly the same as being conjunct the ascendant or conjunct the 7th house cusp. In fact, in some cases it's not even close, as in this case for Robert Redford in Prince Rupert Island. The ultimate way to Prince Rupert, Canada, the ultimate way to decide whether in Mundo works or not is simply to do a lot of charts and see if Robert Redford is your client and he goes to Prince Rupert, Canada, did he have an extreme moon on the horizon experience there? So and there's even ways to predict using these methods. So that's, of course, the ultimate test, and everybody has their experience. But I submit to you that doing it in longitude works. The houses, as we use them, do work. Everybody knows, almost every astrologer knows when a planet is conjunct your angular cusp. You experience tremendous things, very powerful, including Pluto, which, because of Pluto, has what we call high inclination. Its path has a high inclination, and therefore, even when it's conjunct the 7th cusp, you could have a situation like this where when it's on the horizon, it's very, very far away. In fact, it could be even more than 30 degrees away. So anyway, we know in astrology, almost all astrologers agree, that planets on these cusps are powerful, and therefore doing it in longitude makes sense. It may also make sense to do it in Mundo, and many astrologers have worked with that, and from their evidence say that also works. It also fits in with a modern movement towards a more visual type astrology, and this feeling that what the planets are actually doing in the sky has some impact and importance for us. So there you go, my friends. I hope that wasn't too technical and crazy for you and made your head spin. A lot of astrologers are more into the psychology and application, but I think it's good to understand what's going on under the hood, so to speak, have a sense of what this is, and that's what in-mundo positions are. They're based on the actual horizon and the actual meridian plane, which in most astrology we actually don't use, even if your astrology teacher or astrology book told you that planets above the 7th house are just above the horizon. That's not always true. So you have to kind of unlearn that if you've if you've got that in your head. It's usually true, but a little bit later in the day, as we add 10 minutes and 20 minutes to this time, the moon is still going to be above the horizon according to our astrology chart, but physically it's actually below the horizon, say 10 minutes after he's born in Prince Rupert, Canada. Okay, so there you go. There's a lot of stuff I want to tell you about astromaps and relocational astrology. Fantastic stuff that just absolutely works. It's marvelous. We've done little pilot studies to test these ideas, and they hold up. And they're more fun, and it doesn't get into all this technical astronomy stuff. So I'll try to make some time to make videos on that. I hope you got something out of this and help clear that up. It is a point of confusion for a lot of astrologers about what is this in Mundo and why am I using it, etc. So that gives you some perspective on it. You may want to get other opinions or points of view. It's always good to get different points of view. But that's at least one way of understanding it. Okay, thank you very much. I think that's enough for one video. Take care. Namaste.